On my 18th birthday, my parents gave me a suitcase and said, "Time to figure it out." So I figured out their tax fraud. The IRS loved my little anonymous tip. Hello, thank you for your continuous support. This means a lot to us. If you enjoy the stories we share, kindly subscribe to this channel. It will be great if you can leave a comment on which city you are watching from. We might just give you a shout out in our next story. Today's special shout out goes to Grace John from Miami. We are glad you enjoy our stories. Now let's go deeper into today's story. I didn't expect a party. By the time I turned 18, I'd learned not to expect balloons, candles, or people remembering what flavor cake I liked. But I did expect something human. A hug maybe. An awkward "we're proud of you," even if it sounded rehearsed. Instead, I came downstairs to silence thick as old glue and found my parents standing side by side in the foyer, arms crossed, a single object between them. A dark gray suitcase already zipped. My name was written on a tag in ballpoint pen like I was heading to summer camp, not being erased from their lives. My mother handed it to me like she was passing off a donation box. My father said, "Time to figure it out." And that was it. No breakfast. No questions. Just that one sentence that would echo in my head for years like a curse whispered into a well. I didn't cry. That's important. I didn't give them that. I nodded like someone agreeing to help a stranger move a couch, then walked upstairs, packed a toothbrush and my laptop into my backpack and left. No one stopped me. No one asked where I'd go. I walked 6 blocks to the bus station because I didn't want them to see me call a ride. And no, I didn't even have enough money for an Uber. I had $72 to my name, a phone bill past due, and a suitcase I hadn't packed. I didn't open it until later that night in a motel room off Route 14, the kind of place with stained carpets and chain locks that rattle even when they're latched. I thought maybe there'd be money inside, or clothes, or maybe nothing at all. But what I found was worse than empty. It was precise. Inside were loose sheets of paper, some curled at the edges like they'd been kept too close to a heater. A manila folder labeled Education Records LG, even though I hadn't applied to a college. An envelope full of receipts, home renovations, flights to Arizona, donations to a charity I'd never heard of. On one, my name was listed as the recipient. A $15,000 scholarship grant dated 2 years ago. I stared at it so long my eyes burned, then checked the return address. It wasn't a real foundation. It was a shell, something cobbled together to look legitimate. My name was being used for something I hadn't agreed to, hadn't benefited from. And yet somehow I knew, deep in that cold part of me that had been growing since I was a child, that this wasn't new. This was just the first time they'd gotten sloppy enough to leave the evidence where I could find it. I sat on the motel bed without moving for a long time. The room had a hum to it, some quiet vibration in the walls, maybe the fridge or the buzzing light. But it matched the feeling in my chest too perfectly to be random. I didn't know what I was yet. Not a daughter. Not a student. Not homeless exactly, but not tethered to anything solid either. The receipts felt like breadcrumbs left in the dark by someone who didn't expect me to find my way back. But I wasn't going back. I lay down with the suitcase beside me like a sleeping dog, documents fanned across the bed, and stared at the ceiling until the light outside shifted from orange to gray. That was my first night outside their house, and already I understood something vital. I had been evicted, not just from their home, but from the version of myself they'd raised. And what they didn't know was that I was finally awake enough to ask why. I didn't tell anyone. Not that night. Not for weeks. I called into work the next morning, technically still my part-time job at the cafe, and said I'd had a family emergency. Which was true in the loosest, bloodiest sense of the word. I used my last $20 to buy a burner phone and set up a new email. I called myself Morgan Vance and started combing through every line of every receipt in that suitcase like it was a diary written in code. I couldn't have told you then what I was looking for. A mistake maybe. A way to believe it was all a mix-up, that they hadn't really been siphoning money in my name for years. But even back then, under all that numbness, I wasn't looking for answers. I was cataloging proof. The difference between a victim and a witness is one of distance. I was building mine one spreadsheet at a time. The motel didn't ask for ID if you paid cash and didn't make noise. That worked for me. Room 207 had a door that stuck in the frame and a bathroom mirror so warped I started to forget what my face really looked like. I stayed because it was quiet and ugly, and I needed both. I bought instant noodles and ate them dry the first 2 nights, just to make my money stretch. The TV didn't work, but the desk lamp did, and every night I'd lay out the papers from the suitcase and sort them by smell, by font, by color-coded highlighter. I wasn't just trying to understand. I was trying to feel what they'd felt as they signed my name over and over to things I'd never seen, never agreed to, never touched. The receipts weren't just numbers. They were fingerprints, intentions, cowardice made manifest in ballpoint ink. There was a pattern to it, but it came slowly, like frost on a window, hard to see unless you looked from the right angle. My parents hadn't just used my name once. It had started when I was 12. A school savings account I never knew existed. A donation written off in my name to a foundation that didn't appear on any public database. Then tuition fees for an online college I never attended, allegedly paid from a 529 account I'd never had. Some of the addresses matched businesses they owned. Small ones like cleaning companies that seemed to open and close within months, but one in particular caught my eye. LNG Youth Grant Program, listed with our home address as the mailing office. It hit me then, slowly and with bone-deep nausea, that my identity wasn't just collateral. I was the cover, the reason, the smile in the photo stapled to the fraud. The motel clerk was a guy named Rich who wore a wedding ring he never mentioned and asked no questions. Once he saw me carrying the suitcase upstairs and said, "That thing looks heavy." I said nothing. He nodded like I'd agreed with him. I started working night shifts at a bar downtown. Under the table, no paperwork, mopping floors and wiping tables and learning the silence of men who drink alone. Every dollar I made went into an envelope I duct-taped to the underside of the dresser. No banks. Not yet. Not until I knew how deep the damage was. I used library Wi-Fi and started reading IRS bulletins like they were confessionals. I wasn't studying for revenge yet. Not then. I was studying for survival. But even then, the idea had started to germinate. Like mold in the wallpaper. Silent, invisible, already eating everything. Some nights I couldn't sleep. Not from fear, but from the pressure of truth compressing against my chest like someone sitting on it. I'd stare at the ceiling fan and imagine their faces. Not yelling, not begging, just blank. That blankness was the worst. My father had always been distant. But this wasn't just emotional neglect. This was financial erasure. He'd used my name like a tool, and tossed it back, without even checking to see if it still worked. My mother had always spoken in euphemisms. We did what we had to. You'll understand one day. As if manipulation sounded better wrapped in silk. But the documents said what she never did. You were always a convenience. Not a child. Not a person. A loophole. By the third week in room 207, I'd created a spreadsheet on a borrowed laptop. Mapping each instance my name appeared. I printed it out at the library, using coins I found in the bar's tip jar. I didn't feel guilty. I was owed more than quarters. Each line in the spreadsheet made the air feel thicker. By then, I'd memorized the fraud hotline. I would dial it, listen to the recording, then hang up before anyone answered. Not because I was scared, but because I wanted to say it right. I didn't want rage to ruin the clarity. I didn't want pity to leak into my voice. I wanted precision. The kind of precision they'd used forging documents and opening accounts in my name. I wasn't a daughter anymore. I was a witness preparing her testimony, one silent night at a time. The day I made the first call, it rained hard enough to flood the sidewalk. I sat on the edge of the bed, knees pressed together, heart not pounding but cold. Like it knew this wasn't a moment for panic, just execution. I dialed and said, "I have information about identity theft and fraudulent charitable deductions under a false name." The woman on the other end asked for mine. I said, "Morgan Vance." That was the first time I said it out loud. She asked if I had documentation. I said yes. She asked how I obtained it. I said, "It was gifted to me." She didn't ask further. I gave dates, names, amounts. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. When I hung up, the silence in room 207 felt different. Not hollow. Just waiting. There's a moment when your last excuse for someone you love finally dies. Not a dramatic explosion. Just a soft click inside you, like a light switch someone forgot to turn off. For me, it happened 2 weeks after the call. The IRS didn't contact me directly, of course. I'd reported anonymously. But I started noticing changes. A lien was placed on one of the fake businesses. The IRS records updated. Slowly, but they did. I'd go to the library each morning like a ritual, type in my mother's name, my father's, the LLCs they'd built out of lies. I watched the shell game they played start to buckle under audit weight. But what broke me wasn't that. It was a single email, sent to the old address I hadn't touched in months. The subject line: action required. FAFSA recertification. My stomach turned. I clicked. There it was, my name, my social, my future. Being used again like I was still their asset. I dug deeper. The fake scholarship fund tied to LNG youth grants hadn't just existed on paper. It had filed real returns, claimed to serve dozens of students. Some of the names I recognized, kids I'd gone to school with. None of them had ever heard of it. They'd used real names, mixed with invented ones, then fabricated disbursement amounts. But the one name that showed up on every ledger, every expense report, every donor receipt, was mine. Lena Grace Hollowell. My real name. Listed as the primary recipient, the supposed inspiration for the foundation. They had built an entire web of lies, and at the center of it, I'd been cast like a lead in a play I never auditioned for. Every time I set Morgan into the phone, it felt more and more like I was burning the ashes of that girl who'd once believed in birthday hugs. I stopped sleeping. My dreams became files, numbers, voices asking why I'd let it go on so long. I started recording everything: conversations at the bar, overheard bits in libraries, the quiet way people spoke when they thought no one was listening. I wasn't paranoid. I was archiving. I'd lived 18 years, not knowing how many versions of me existed on paper. So now I documented everything. I wrote letters I never sent. I drafted affidavits in the back of a ledger. I started to know tax code better than I knew my own favorite food. There's a particular clarity that comes when you realize the people who raised you never planned for you to succeed, only for you to serve. That's when I started thinking not just about exposure but about precision. I didn't want revenge that screamed. I wanted silence that cut. I wrote to a nonprofit that helps victims of financial abuse. Didn't use my real name but gave real documents. They responded with resources, with a list of lawyers who specialized in restitution cases. I didn't call any of them. Not yet. What I needed wasn't just legal action. I needed ownership. I wanted to unthread the whole tapestry they'd stitched from my stolen future. One page at a time, I traced every false filing. I created timelines annotated with receipts. My walls became a private war room. The suitcase became a relic. Not a burden now, but a vault. I began placing new documents inside. A statement from the IRS confirming audit initiation. A letter to a state licensing board reporting fraud. A draft of a press release I never intended to send. I was building my own archive in my own name. And then came the credit report. I hadn't dared check it before, afraid of what I'd find. But one night around 3 a.m., with rain hissing against the window and the room too quiet to hide my heartbeat, I pulled it up. There were 7 accounts in my name I'd never opened. 1 credit card maxed out. A car loan defaulted. A business line of credit connected to the now-defunct youth grant. My mouth went dry. My ears rang. My hands didn't shake though. I just sat there staring until my eyes blurred. It wasn't just identity theft. It was identity murder. They hadn't just used me. They'd buried me in paper and signed the grave with love. The next morning I walked 3 miles to a notary. Paid with a $10 bill folded so tightly it had creases like veins. I filed an official statement of identity fraud. Sent it certified mail. I kept the receipt. Put it in the suitcase. And that's when I knew they wouldn't stop until someone made them. This wasn't just mismanagement or desperation. This was entitlement. They believed they'd earned the right to use me. And I had spent years asking for so little, they thought I'd ask for nothing forever. But I was done asking. I wasn't invisible. I wasn't voiceless. I was a whistle coiled tight, ready to pierce the silence. It didn't arrive at their house. I made sure of that. I tracked it through the IRS portal, watched as the certified audit notification was rerouted to their business address downtown. The one with the glass facade they were always so proud of. I imagined the envelope sitting on that desk. My father's name printed in thick black letters. Official seal in the corner. And a silence settling over him as he opened it. I wasn't there, of course. But I didn't have to be. Some things you can feel like aftershocks in your bones. It arrived on a Thursday. That night, their business's website went offline. The day after, their foundation's social media quietly disappeared. And just like that, the performance began to unravel. Not with an explosion but with silence. Surgical, invisible, precise. I watched from the library computer. I cleared my browser history twice before even clicking their site. Heart pounding even though I knew they couldn't trace me. It was gone. LNG Youth Grant Foundation. Under maintenance. I clicked refresh until the message changed. This page no longer exists. I sat there so still a librarian came over and asked if I needed help. I said I was just resting. But inside, something cold and patient in me was smiling for the first time in years. Not because I wanted to ruin them, but because I needed to. For myself. For the version of me who once believed love looked like silence. For the girl who'd spent birthdays pretending to be grateful for indifference dressed up as discipline. That weekend, I saw them in person for the first time in nearly 3 months. I didn't plan to. I was passing through downtown after a shift, walking past the upscale cafe where they always used to meet clients and friends. And there they were. My mother sitting alone staring at her phone, her lips tight. She didn't see me. My father came out of the cafe a few minutes later, whispered something, and they both walked off in opposite directions. Not together. Not even close. I stood behind a delivery truck and watched them like a stranger watching a pair of fading celebrities. Recognizable, but irrelevant. I didn't feel hate. That surprised me. I felt distance. Not revenge yet. Just detachment. Like the thread between us had frayed to a single hair, and I could choose at any time to cut it. But I wasn't finished. I hadn't said everything I needed to say, not in words but in actions. I opened a checking account under my real name the following Monday. Brought my birth certificate, my passport, my notarized affidavit declaring identity theft. The banker raised an eyebrow at the pile of documents but said nothing. He just nodded, typed slowly, and handed me a clean debit card with my name on it. Lena G. Hollowell. It felt heavier than I expected. Like proof. Like reclaiming something I didn't know I had lost. I held it in my hand all the way back to the motel, thumb pressed to the raised lettering. That night, I placed it inside the suitcase with the rest of the evidence. Not because I needed to keep it safe, but because that suitcase wasn't just where things ended now. It was where things began. I mailed another anonymous tip the next day, this time to the state's Department of Charitable Solicitations. I included details about their fake donors, the duplicated disbursement amounts, and the falsified volunteer logs they used to justify tax exemptions. I didn't have to invent anything. Their paperwork had never expected to be seen by someone who could actually read it, who knew what to look for, who understood what silence hides. I didn't want them jailed. That wasn't the goal. I wanted them exposed. I wanted the mask removed permanently. I wanted their friends to whisper, their clients to cancel. I wanted that familiar emptiness they'd handed to me on my birthday to echo back through their own lives like a tide rolling in at last. 2 weeks later, a new lien appeared on their house. Public record. I printed it, highlighted the docket number, folded it slowly, and placed it in the suitcase beside the scholarship document with my name on it. The weight of the paper was oddly satisfying. Like each one had mass proof that truth was no longer weightless. A week after that, the nonprofit status of their foundation was suspended, temporarily at first, then pending dissolution. I didn't celebrate. I didn't tell anyone. I just stood at the window of room 207 and watched the sun rise and fall like a time-lapse reel only I could see. My world was still small, still quiet, but for the first time it felt like mine. That month I started drawing again. Bad sketches at first. Faces I barely remembered, a crumpled napkin I'd kept since I was 13, the shape of the cracked tile near the fridge in our old kitchen. Things that didn't matter but still haunted. I wasn't healing yet. I don't think I even believed in healing, but I'd begun marking the distance between who I'd been and who I was becoming, and it showed up in lines, in shadows, in the space between what I saw and what I finally knew I had survived. The audit wasn't the end. It was just a spotlight. And I had learned how to move in the dark. I chose the diner because it was public, neutral, and bright enough to strip away illusion. They couldn't perform in places like that, where the eggs come overcooked and the coffee is poured by someone who's heard it all before. I'd called ahead, asked the hostess if they could reserve the window booth for an old family visit, and left no name. They said sure. I arrived early. Wore nothing memorable. Just jeans and a dark coat. I ordered tea I didn't drink, and watched the entrance like I was waiting for a train that might not come. But I knew she'd be there. My mother had never missed her Wednesday bridge meeting. Her rituals were gospel, even when the church was burning. She walked in at 8:14 a.m., hair pinned back too tightly, makeup thinner than usual, as if even that part of her life had started to erode. She didn't see me at first. She moved toward her usual table like a wind-up toy set to routine. But then she turned. Our eyes met. Just for a second. And that was all it took. Her body didn't flinch, but her mouth parted just slightly, as if a word had tried to escape and died on the threshold. I nodded once, just enough to signal this is real. She walked over slowly, eyes scanning the room like she expected someone to stop her. No one did. She sat across from me, placed her purse beside her on the booth bench, and folded her hands like she was preparing for a prayer she wasn't sure she believed in anymore. "You look well," she said, and the lie was so soft it didn't even sting. I didn't respond, just reached into my bag and pulled out a plastic sleeve. Inside, a photocopy of the IRS audit letter, the fake scholarship documentation, and the notarized identity theft affidavit I'd filed. I laid it between us neatly, like a check at the end of a long, bitter meal. Her hands didn't move. Her face didn't shift. But her eyes, those betrayed her. They widened just enough to let the truth in. And behind them, I saw the calculation begin. Not grief. Not shame. Strategy. Even now, she was reaching for the next move. The next story. But I beat her to it. "I don't want your apology," I said. "I want you to know I know. And I want you to wonder how much more I know." She didn't speak. Just stared. I let the silence stretch like a tight wire between us. The waitress came and refilled my tea. My mother didn't touch her menu. Didn't look up. I pushed the folder an inch closer to her, then stood. Calmly. Slowly. I took my coat from the back of the chair and slid my arms into it like I had all the time in the world. Her mouth opened again. "Lena." But I was already walking away. Not fast. Not dramatic. Just enough to let the weight of the silence catch up with her. I left the documents on the table. I wanted her to take them home, read them in private, feel them grow heavier in her hands than any family photo ever had. I wanted her to sit in the driveway of the house they might soon lose and wonder how I had gotten this smart, this silent, this surgical. And more importantly, when, outside, the sky was that flat gray that makes it hard to tell what time it is. I walked until the diner was out of sight, turned the corner and kept going. My legs were steady. My lungs didn't shake. I didn't feel triumphant, just done. I didn't need her tears. I didn't need her denial. I needed her to remember the exact moment she saw me, whole, unafraid and untethered, and knew she could no longer touch me without consequences. The real confrontation wasn't the words. It was the mirror I left in front of her, the one she couldn't walk away from without seeing what she'd become. That night, I didn't return to room 207. I went to a new place. Shared housing uptown, quiet, safer. I didn't bring the suitcase. I brought the copy of my new ID, the clean bank statements, and a folder labeled Next Steps. I knew this wasn't over. They'd try something. There'd be a letter, a voicemail, a long email pretending none of it was what it looked like. But I wouldn't open it. I didn't need their version anymore. I had my own. And it was written not in pain but in proof. The sign went up 3 weeks later. I didn't see it in person. I saw it on Zillow. A red banner across the top of the listing. Pre-foreclosure. Owner notification issued. No photo of the inside. Just the front lawn where I'd once buried a time capsule as a school project. The cracked steps where my mother used to sit on Saturday mornings drinking coffee she never offered to share. I stared at the image on my phone for a long time, thumb hovering over the share button, even though I had no one to send it to. I wasn't smiling. I wasn't crying. Just sitting there in a laundromat that smelled like bleach and burned lint, letting the weight of that small red banner settle into the part of me that had waited a lifetime to be believed. The fallout wasn't fast. It never is. What comes after the explosion isn't fire. It's ash. The quiet kind that gets into your clothes, your throat, your memory. Their foundation had been stripped of status. Their accounts slowly frozen. Their clients cautious and then gone. I tracked it all quietly, never touching anything directly, just observing. My mother's Facebook became a carousel of cryptic quotes about betrayal and strength, posted at 2 a.m. Her friends commented less and less. My father's LinkedIn disappeared. Their silence at last began to match the silence they'd raised me in. Only now it hurt them. And it wasn't just financial. Their world, one built on perception, on curated identity, was unraveling. And there was no daughter to fix it. I never responded to the first email. Subject line: Can we talk?
No punctuación. No apology. No acknowledgement.
Just an invitation to participate in the rewrite of a story I never agreed to tell. I deleted it. A week later, a voicemail. My father's voice. Measured. Hello. You don't understand how hard it was. What we had to do. We love you. He said we like they were still a unit. Like their decisions had been forged in unity instead of stitched from cowardice. I listened to it once. Then again. Then deleted it too. Not out of spite. Out of necessity. Every contact was a thread. And I was no longer interested in sewing myself back into their narrative. I wasn't their daughter anymore. I was my own witness. And now finally my own protector. In small ways, I started to re-enter the world. Got a better job. Legal assistant at a nonprofit that helped domestic survivors with housing and documentation. The irony didn't escape me. Every intake form I processed felt like a mirror I'd once looked into and walked away from. I never told my story. Not to anyone there. But I recognized the signs in others. The way some women flinched when asked for ID. The hesitation before signing their name. I wasn't just rebuilding. I was learning how to protect. The kind of protection no one had offered me. The kind that makes you less afraid of silence. And more afraid of losing yourself in noise. The motel room stayed empty for weeks before I finally returned to clear it out. Room 207 looked smaller than I remembered. The suitcase was still under the bed untouched. I sat on the edge of the mattress and opened it. The papers were still there. Audit forms. Letters. The scholarship lie. My fake FAFSA. My real name. I added the Zillow screenshot to the top of the stack. Closed it. Sat in silence. Then I took out a small notebook I'd started carrying and wrote one line. I'm not done, but I'm free enough to rest. It wasn't a manifesto. Just a moment. A way of acknowledging that I had survived not only what they did, but who I had to become to respond to it. That night I walked past their house. Just once. No lights on. Blinds closed. A lawn untended, flowers wilted, the mailbox slightly open. The neighborhood looked the same, but I wasn't part of it anymore. I was a visitor. A ghost who'd stopped haunting. I didn't feel anger. Just a kind of distant awe at how much I'd endured without ever raising my voice. They had taught me silence. But I had taught it back to them with precision, with receipts, with enough restraint to make it echo. It started as an idea I didn't take seriously. A sentence scrawled in the margins of a page I tore out of my notebook and stuffed between legal folders. What if the fake scholarship became a real one? It sat there for weeks, almost mocking me. But every time I flipped past it, pulling forms, indexing affidavits, writing motions for people who had also lived invisible, my eye caught on it. Eventually I stopped seeing it as a fantasy and started seeing it as a blueprint. They'd used my name to fake a future that never belonged to me. Now I would use it to build one for someone else. For kids like me. For the forgotten. For the evicted. For the ones handed suitcases instead of safety. I filed the paperwork under a different name at first just to see if it could work. A simple nonprofit. No frills, no press, no splashy launch. Just a mission. Microgrants for 17 to 19-year-olds forced out of their homes due to family estrangement, coercion, or neglect. The first deposit was small. Money I'd earned and saved in silence. No blood money. No inheritance. Just mine. I didn't advertise it. No interviews. Just a short landing page, one quote. You don't have to be chosen to be deserving. The kind of line I wish someone had told me when I was 18. Sitting in room 207. Staring at fake documents that told a lie louder than anything they'd ever said to my face. The first application came from a girl named Maris, just 19, recently pushed out of her stepfather's house after coming out. She didn't ask for much, just enough to cover her laptop repair and the deposit on a shared room. She apologized 3 times in the application for bothering us. I read it in the dark, my hands shaking, not from grief but from a kind of furious recognition. I approved it the next morning. Sent a handwritten note with the grant check. No return address. Just one line. You deserve more than survival. She wrote back a month later. Not with thanks but with updates. Her job. Her classes. Her new cat. I printed it. Folded it. Tucked it into the same suitcase that once held proof of every lie tied to my name. Now finally it held something true. Word spread slowly but cleanly. I limited applications at first, making sure every dollar counted. I read each one like a sacred document. Every false name I'd ever lived under whispered to me as I scanned the requests. Help with community college tuition, a replacement ID, therapy costs. Nothing extravagant. Just the bare minimum. The kind of support that had always been treated like an inconvenience by the people who claimed to love me. I never signed the checks with my full name. Just LG. The initials they'd once used to forge a narrative now stood for something entirely different. Liberation granted. Quiet, unglamorous, irreversible. It wasn't about forgiveness. Not for them. I didn't want redemption for the people who turned my name into a tax shelter. I wanted to compost the wreckage. Turn the rot into something that could grow. I didn't answer their second email. Or their third. But I opened the fourth one. Just once. My father's name in the subject line. No message body. Just an attachment. A scan of my childhood drawing, one I'd made at age 7. Our family standing under a tree, everyone holding hands. His handwriting scrawled at the bottom. We didn't know how to do better. I stared at it for a long time. Then I saved the file. Not out of nostalgia, but because even that deserved to be witnessed. The next day, I added a new section to the scholarship website. In her name. A memorial page of sorts. Not for me. But for every version of me they tried to overwrite. I didn't list their crimes. I didn't explain the past. I just listed names, first names only, of real recipients. Real futures. The ledger now spoke truth. It was lean but honest. The site didn't get much traffic. That was fine. It wasn't about the eyes on it. It was about the ones who needed to find it when they were one breath away from giving up. One evening after work, I pulled the suitcase from my closet for the last time. I laid out the papers one by one. The fraud. The audits. The restitution forms. The foreclosure listing. And beside them, the notes from recipients. The photos they'd sent of dorm rooms and certificates and small soft joys. I took a breath. Slow. Deliberate. Then I began shredding the old pages. Not to erase. To complete the ritual. Each strip of paper felt like a piece of winter finally breaking loose. I wasn't protecting evidence anymore. I was clearing space. I didn't keep the shredded paper. I let it fall into the waste bin like ash from a fire I no longer needed to tend.
No ceremony.
No second-guessing. Just release. The suitcase, empty now, felt lighter than I remembered. Like it had been holding more than paper all this time. Like it had been carrying silence, expectation. The long ache of someone trying to be loved through obedience. I wiped it down not out of sentimentality, but because I wanted it clean. Not to use again. Not to pass down. Just clean. Neutral. Disarmed. The last artifact from a life that no longer needed archiving. I zipped it shut for the final time, then slid it under my bed. Not as a secret but as a symbol. The same way you keep photographs of injuries that have long since healed. Not to relive them. Just to remember how far you've walked without limping. Years passed in soft, steady layers. The fund grew, not huge, not viral, but solid. Trusted. Students I'd never meet sent photos from classrooms, art studios, job sites. Some wrote letters. Some didn't. It didn't matter. The point was not their gratitude. The point was their movement. Their continuance. Every check I signed felt like another brick in a foundation I was finally building with my own hands. I never used the full name my parents had given me again. I legally shortened it, Lena G. Nothing more. I let the Hollowell fade out of my signature, like the residue of a lie finally allowed to disappear. I wasn't angry anymore. I was unavailable. And in its own way, that was the greatest revenge of all. They never wrote again after the drawing. I think on some level they understood that no matter how many explanations they tried to write, I now spoke a language they couldn't fake fluency and boundaries. There were no more letters. No calls.
No surprise visits.
Just a quiet vacancy where once there had been manipulation dressed up as parenting. I did hear, from a distant cousin much later, that they'd moved out of state, changed their names in some business filings, tried to start over. I felt nothing when I heard it. Not even triumph. Just stillness. Like hearing news about strangers who vaguely resemble someone you used to know. The last time I opened the suitcase, it was for something small. I had received a letter from a girl in New Mexico, handwritten and nervous. She wanted to thank me, not for the money, but for believing her story without needing her to bleed in detail. I reread it twice, then tucked it gently inside the empty suitcase. Not as evidence, as grace. One last offering to the girl I had been. The one who, on her 18th birthday, was handed a suitcase and told to figure it out. I wish she could see where we are now. Not rich, not famous, just free. And that's enough. I kept the suitcase until the following spring. Then one morning, I carried it to the donation bin outside the shelter and left it without a note. Someone else would use it now. Maybe to leave. Maybe to return. Maybe to carry what matters. I walked away without looking back. The sun soft on my back, the air unburdened. There was no great rush of emotion. No final thought. Just this: I am no longer what they made. I am what I chose. And I chose to stay. If this story moved you, helped you feel seen, or reminded you that silence can be powerful, please take a second to like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us keep telling the stories people are too afraid to say out loud. And if you've ever had to rebuild from something you didn't choose, you're not alone. We see you. See you soon in our next story.